So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for the ABCD Emerging Practice for Local Government. And for those that are unaware, ABCD stands for Asset-Based Community Development, or Community-Led Development, or Community-Driven Development. It's explained different ways in different places, but essentially it means the same thing. And myself, Michelle Dunscombe, along with my colleagues, Dee Brooks and Fiona Miller, all of us from Australia, are happy to welcome you to this session of the 2021 World Community Development Conference in Kenya. So thank you. But before we get started with our session, and doing our introductions, and because this is to be an interactive session, I'd just like to do an acknowledgement to country. So I will ask Dee just to click over. So thank you, Dee. So this evening, I'm coming to you from Tanarang Land, part of the Kulin Nation here in Victoria, so the southern part of Australia. And I wish to acknowledge over 65,000 years of custodianship of this land and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I honour the spirit and wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia, and collectively we commit to strengthening community with learning, culture, spirituality, and ensuring that together we continue to connect and grow as one. The Yida Institute, which we are all a part of here, myself, Dee and Fiona, acknowledge that the lands of Australia were never ceded, and we commit to ongoing truth-telling, awareness and reconciliation with First Nations communities across our country. So thank you all for joining us, and I'm actually going to now hand over to Fiona. So thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, Michelle. So we're going to get to know each other before we start, because we do like to work in a participatory way. So we're going to get you to check in, and because it's a small group, we might go around quickly. We can be included in that. So, and in the chat, if you want to type in there as well, that would be great. So just please share your name, where you're from, and what ignites the fire in your belly. So what really brings that passion up. So in the chat, if you like, if anyone wants to speak it, please do.
I'm happy to go first.
Go for it, Dee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Dee. I'm from Australia. I mean, I'm based here. Before COVID, I would spend about 6 months in the country and 6 months out. I've been an intentional nomad for coming up to 6 years. So I've had no fixed address. I just travel in between job to job until COVID stopped me here at my eldest daughter's. I thought I'd come here for 2 weeks until it blew over, and it's been 18 months. So this is where I am now. So I'm in a place called Bendigo, which is on the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. What ignites the fire in my belly? I think for me, it's that kind of tipping point moment where you're in a conversation with someone, or you're talking about community, or you're in community, whatever it might be, and there's that kind of tipping point where it's not kind of you leading or teaching or being anymore, and people kind of drop into that space of ownership and kind of take up that power of their own. And in ABCD, we quite often call it leading by stepping back. It's this constant dance. And so that really ignites the fire in my belly, because it's kind of a bit of an aim for me. Like when I can see where a community is kind of heading, and I can guide and support them. And when that kind of drops, it's just so exciting. I just love it. And then I'm there more as a supporter while they continue to grow and move forward. So yeah, it's an exciting little pivotal moment for me. So thank you. Oh, we didn't say, because I said I'll pick up the piece, and now I'm going to say piece back. We use a virtual talking piece. So I'm just putting the piece back to the virtual center for someone else to have a go if they'd like to. So yeah, piece back from me.
Thanks, Dee, and I'll pick up. I've just popped mine in the chat also, but as I said when I welcomed you all, I'm Michelle Dunscombe, and I live in a small village, King Lake, with a population of around about 1,500 people here on Tanarung country in Australia, and my passion is particularly connecting with people and rural communities. So I work a lot with both Dee and Fiona across rural communities here in Australia, and I've had the great pleasure of working in rural communities in the UK as well. So that's a little bit about me. So peace back.
I'll pick up the piece. So I'm Fiona Miller, and I live down here in the beautiful, cold, chilly Tasmania. I live on the banks of the Kanamaluka River, and we got about 30 minutes of no fog today. So it was like, whoa, it was really quite a spooky day and dark. It was like, the sun's not coming out. And I work with the bookends next to me on my screen, which are Michelle and Dee, and I have what excites me and puts fire in my belly is connecting people, and seeing people achieve, but also through art. I'm a really passionate person about using art to create conversations and have stories and placemaking, and especially with all abilities, because I don't think anyone should miss out, and we should just be inclusive, and I don't understand how we're not. And currently what's exciting me right this second is I can see Bob's background, and there's all these amazing artworks behind him, and I'm intrigued by Bob's backgrounds, and so I'm quite distracted by that. But at the same time, it's actually telling a story, and Bob might tell me about them later. Maybe after this session, he'll tell me what they're all about. So that's me. Peace back. And if anyone wants to, I'm happy to read them out from the chat, or you're most welcome to pick up and speak.
I'm happy to tell you about the art.
Go for it, Bob.
It's just fun, and I've been retired a long time. A lot of the work we do is pro bono, and people send to see my office and then send me pictures. So they get moved around quite a lot, but none of them are originals apart from the ones I've done myself. So, yeah.
I love that. So you have a connection with art. That's what does it.
Particularly colour. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
I'm happy to go next. I did write in the chat because I wasn't sure which instruction to follow. So anyway, I'll do both. So I'm Jen. I'm based in Norfolk in the UK. And the thing that particularly interests me is about how practitioners can and do learn from each other all the time. It's just that they're not necessarily always aware that what they're doing is learning or sharing their practices. And so I'm particularly interested in how we can highlight it and make it part of everyday practice. It already is, but it's actually like acknowledging that it is, so that we can have a chance to reflect. And some of the things that were discussed in the plenary this morning about this being a space where we can actually step back and reflect on our practice is brilliant. And the values of networking that were discussed as well just really resonated with me earlier this morning.
Thank you, Jen. And yes, agree.
Yeah, I can pick it up from you, Jen. I'm Dominic. I wrote in the chat Dominic from Europe because I grew up pretty much in not all of Europe, but many countries. I traveled around, and so that's me. Currently, I'm in Germany. What gets me out of bed every morning is seeing persons with disabilities actually having full voice, choice, and control of their lives, because this is my passion. That's my work. I work in inclusive community development, and like you said, Fiona, I can't imagine how we cannot be inclusive as community development practitioners. But I've seen it so often that persons with disabilities are simply left out and no one believes in their abilities. So that's why I also put seeing persons with disabilities as leaders in their communities. So I've worked in a few countries where actually persons with disabilities are people that are being looked up to by the communities, because they actually lead on a particular skill like organic farming. And that is wonderful. And that gives me goosebumps. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning. Thank you.
That's beautiful.
Hi, will I go next?
Sure, thanks, Donna.
Hi, so I'm Donna Stewart. I'm from Northern Ireland, and I am a manager of a volunteer bureau. Can identify with Dominique. I manage a disability project as well as a mainstream project, and there's nothing more wonderful for me than empowering those people with disabilities and getting them to take control of their life and make their decisions for their needs. I have this thought that you should never tell people what you need. You should always ask them what they need. Never assume that we know what someone knows, because we don't take them with us. So for me, it's all about empowering people, about taking people with me, about connecting to other community groups who are trying to change the lives of our most marginalised and vulnerable in our community. And every day in my work, when I see that happen, it just makes me feel proud to be part of that.
Beautiful. And I know, Hannah, you've put yours in the chat, and we had a chat before, so.
Okay. So I don't need to introduce myself now. No, but what ignites me, you know, now I'm from UJ, from the University of Johannesburg in Johannesburg, South Africa. You know, ABCD is just my passion, and it's just so wonderful when you work with students and you just realize and the penny drops that when they move away from problem-based to asset-based approach, even in the poorest of the poorest communities, you know, they have results, you know, and they stop saying, but, you know, we must first provide basic things to these communities, you know, before we can use ABCD. You know, yeah, you must first address these needs and problems, and then you bring in asset-based things. And when the penny drops and they say, no, we can use ABCD with anybody from the start. This is wonderful. Those are our moments. It's wonderful.
You're so right. Thank you. And Alexandra, if you would like to put something in the chat, that would be great. We saw you duck in and out, and I'm going, unless you'd like to just say hi quickly, but I'm handing over to Dee now, and we'll kick off with the rest of the plenary.
Did you want to introduce yourself, Alexander, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm Alexander Ruto.
It's very quiet. We can't really hear you.
Can't hear you.
Just a moment. Hello, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Still very quiet. Maybe, Alexander, if it's okay, if you could write in the chat.
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Oh, yes, got you now.
Okay. I'm Alexander Ruto from Kenya. It's my pleasure to see you all here, and I'm looking forward to assisting you technically. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Wonderful. So I'm going to start off with giving you a bit of a fire hose edition of ABCD. Michelle and I are both faculty members of the ABCD Institute in Chicago, and we're the one of 3 in Australia faculty members. Most of them are USA based, and there's 1 European. So we've been around this work for more than 20 years. It's something that the 3 of us are very passionate about. And like Hannah was saying, we find when people get it, and you can flip that kind of mind shift, it's like a new world opens. You can never go back to needs or deficit-based work again. But I'd just like to, before I go into the fire hose, I'd like to just check, is there anyone here who does not know ABCD at all? If you could put your hand up, is there anyone? Okay. What about a little bit? You know about it, kind of, you've read it, you understand what it is, maybe theories yet, a little bit, okay? Yep, good. People who might have applied it, who have actually in their work, and yeah, I'm glad, good. Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad those people put their hand up. Okay. So that gives me just a bit of an indication. So particularly then for Hannah and Bob, you will understand that what I'll kind of focus on with is that kind of mind shift. So Donna, Dominique and Jen can have a good understanding for what we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to go over ABCD. Michelle will then talk to you more about the application in local government. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll go from there. Okay. Hang on. Why have I just lost you all? I could see you all a second ago. Okay, here we go. All right, this is better. All right, now I've got you. Okay, so Jodie and John, who are both still very much alive and still very much thinking and writing up their experiences that they've gathered for over many, many decades. It was many years ago that they were interviewing communities, interviewing about what are the things that are going well in your community, having discussions about when things were working, what was it that was going well? So, and this is a very old photo of them. And what they discovered was that initially they found 5 assets, which I'll tell you about in a second. They found 5 assets that if these are connected really well in community, we can get really good mobilization. It's about connecting those up through relationships, of course. Over the years, there was a 6th asset added by a Kiwi and an Aussie. And so I'll tell you what those all are at the moment, but there's these 6 assets that when they're well connected, we can get some really good mobilization and work done. So on the left is the green book, which is kind of like the ABCD Bible, but it's where we talk about building communities from the inside out. Now, I've never met anyone who's read it cover to cover, but it's just got the most amazing examples and stories in there. So this was a book that Jodie and John brought out in response to the what they were receiving, the information that they were getting back from interviewing people in communities. So basically, and Hannah talked a lot about this in her presentation, with that glass half empty and half full. If we're looking at communities through that half full, then we're looking at communities and its citizens or community members as already having capacities and assets. And that's that building communities from the inside out. That's building on what we already have. And for Dominique, and I think it was Donna in disabilities, we've also over the years developed workshops and training, which is person-centered, community-driven, because it just blends so beautifully with all the person-centered thinking frameworks, sorry. So it's really a no-brainer that they go together so well. With the glass half empty, if we're looking or viewing through that lens, looking at communities like that, we're looking at them as having deficiencies and needs. And the thing that most bugs me about this is if people are looking through this lens and we're working alongside or going into a community with a deficit-based lens, the very first message that we are telling people is that they are deficient and they are broken and they need fixing. And it's just not a good starting block. And it's not good enough as far as I'm concerned. When we know that everyone has something to offer, everyone's got something that they can give. So when we look at that glass half full, like Hannah was saying in her talk, that's where we discover the power of what we need, or what is there that can address any of those needs or challenges, or whatever you want to call them. But the other thing is, what we find is quite often when we're supporting communities to find that glass half full, sometimes the issues and problems fall away. It might just be something they've been talking about for years. It actually wasn't as important as they thought, because when there's this abundance of skills and gifts and talents and resources and networks that people do discover, they run with that, and they'll run with that. What else can we do with this? So the ABCD Institute, we probably spent about a year just in discussions, and not full on, but like when we were together, when we'd be in Chicago or even at a conference somewhere in the world, we'd have, for any of you who know like open space technology, we'd have kind of an open space session and rediscovering, you know, what is it that what are the values that kind of guide us? And so the ABCD Institute has come up with these, and you can find these values with more detail around it on their website. And like I was saying before, the thing that ignites my passion is that leading by stepping back. It's that constant dance, that we do include everyone. We have a belief in possibility. You know, it's such an important thing to do, that believe that anything is possible. We work for equity and justice. We nurture citizen-led action. We build relationships for mutual support. And we start small. Starting small is okay. And it's like we have to remember to celebrate those small steps too. Like when we have those kind of smaller wins, to not just kind of brush them off. So what is ABCD in a little bit of a nutshell? And I love that the ones that Hannah put up earlier, I was looking at them and going, it really is like so universal. These kind of really foundational principles. So the first one, of course, is that we're focusing on assets and strengths rather than problems and needs. So that one's a bit of a no-brainer. We identify and mobilize community and individual assets, skills, and passions. There is a whole lot of different practices and processes within that identifying and mobilizing in ABCD that we call asset mapping. And there's a whole debate on its own around that. My personal view or vision of asset mapping is it needs to be intentional and purposeful. If it's not, you're just creating bloody lists. Like, it's really about that mobilization. How do we identify those assets in community and connect them up in a really good way for good action? The third is that it is built on community leadership, and community leadership is not always the usual suspects. It's not the leaders of the social service clubs who say, I am a community leader. It could actually be the mum down the road who looks after all the kids after school while everyone's parents are still at work. She wouldn't call herself a leader, but it's community leadership. So it's also looking at not the usual suspects. And then really foundationally, ABCD builds relationships. And will not only builds, but it builds, maintains, nurtures, strengthens. It's those connecting points, those bumping places where people come together and build those relationships and strengthen themselves and each other. So those are kind of those four foundational areas of ABCD. So these are the 6 assets. Anything in, well, the brackets for number 2 and 3 are the American language, and we just kind of Aussified them a little bit. But number 1 is those talent, skills, and passions of individuals. You know, everyone has got something. The second is community groups and networks. So it could be community groups like the social service clubs, but it could also be networks like babysitting clubs or anything, those kind of formal and informal associations where people come together. The third is the government and non-government agencies. So, and we're going to talk about them. Well, Michelle will, and then Fiona's going to do an exercise with you around that. Then the physical assets, we like to think of the physical assets in 2 different ways. So we've got the physical assets that are like the built environment, which is your buildings and equipment and, you know, schools with commercial kitchens and big sporting fields that are often underutilized. And then we've also got the natural physical assets. So the land, the beaches, the walkways, the mountains, the forests, whatever it is. So we've got physical assets in those 2 different ways. Then the economic assets is the productive work of individuals. So what is it that we actually do that we offer in our community? Consumer spending power. Where do people spend their dollars? And there's a whole lot of examples of asset mapping of that consumer spending power from around the world, particularly from the Coady Institute in Canada, where they talk about the leaky bucket. And so where does the economy or the dollar in someone's pocket, where does it leave the community? Where does it stay? Do we drive 20 kilometers or miles away to shop at a big conglomerate supermarket, or do we shop local? So we can really kind of look at that consumer spending power as an asset. And then also the local businesses, of course, the ones that we support and the ones that are in our communities. So those were the 5 that Jody and John identified. And then this last one was Peter Kenyon, who's from the Bank of Ideas in Australia, and David Wilson from Heritage Futures in New Zealand. And they talked about the power of story and how important it is, and part of that building relationships, to share each other's stories. And stories stick like glue. We'll hear someone's story and we will remember it way after we've forgotten about the theory. It's those stories that really stick with us. So part of those stories that we talk about in community that really strengthen the core of what we do is that heritage and culture. And what is the culture of a local community? How do we enter it respectfully and purposefully? Who are the local identities? What are the values of this community? So we can ask these questions and be really, really mindful about how we kind of enter a community, or who we talk to and how we talk to them, and questions that we might ask. Or I remember one of our ABCD colleagues from the UK did a placement in Tanzania, I think it was, and he was talking to the children at the playground, and he said to each of them, take me to the person in your village that makes you smile the most. And so what he ended up happening was he was taken to grandmothers, to neighbors, to fathers, mothers, taken to these incredible people to go and find and learn more about, just from the power of asking that one question, like who makes you smile? So I love that. So the 3 drivers that we have, that were identified through ABCD, and it was based on some conversations with a few practitioners, because we would have people say to us, we understand the 6 assets. There was one woman who came up to me after a conference once and she said, I tried that ABCD thing, it didn't work. When she told me what had happened, she said she'd heard about it. She went back to her staff. She put 6 sheets of paper on the boardroom table. They all filled them up with the 6 assets and nothing happened. And I said, well, you know, you made a directory. You made a directory of assets. So what drives this? What drives us forward? One is that helping other possibilities emerge. We want to move forward and find what are the other possibilities? Where's the movement? How can we do this together? Discovering care is a whole nother element of its own in ABCD that we don't have time to go into today. But when we're discovering care, we're discovering what people truly care about enough to act on. So we're not saying, hey, can you come and help me with this? And someone, you know, some people might go, yeah, sure, I'll come and help you, but it's not really my thing. But when we're discovering care, we're having a learning conversation from the bottom up, and we're finding what people care about enough to act on. Really important. And then, like I said before, the relationships. So building, maintaining, and strengthening them is such an important part of ABCD. So I don't know how I'm going for timing, ladies. Good. Yes. So there's your fire hose. So I just want to stop for 1 second. Michelle's going to put a question in the chat. And just to answer a couple of your own, we've got like 2 minutes before we segue over to Michelle. Are there any comments, questions, concerns, anything that you'd like to add? Yep, Jen.
It's a question about the assets, and it kind of is trying to connect thoughts I was having whilst listening to Hannah's presentation this morning and then listening to your presentation of the assets. And a clear message was coming through about valuing what people have, like their skills, their capacities, their interests, and all of those things, which I completely get. But there was I think where it was slightly jarring and confusing me, I might just be muddled, was I think that this morning earlier it was said that people should really focus just within their own community and focus on what's there, which to me, when I was thinking about it in social capital terms, is like, well, that would be great at bonding social capital, and it'd be probably pretty good at bridging social capital if you were linking between different people within a geographical community, say. But it kind of was a challenge to like, well, what if there needs to be linking social capital to other outside agencies or organizations who might have some assets and resources that the community might want to draw on or need to draw on in order to fulfill their wishes and desires. And it seems that from your 6-point thing, that linking to government and agencies would be possible. Have I understood that right now? That
yes. Okay. And I think that rather than me answer that, I think Fiona will a little bit later. And there might be something coming up with Michelle. So I don't want to kind of preempt and jump onto what they're about to answer. But please, Jen, hold that thought. Okay. If at the end of this, you still don't have more clarity around that, let's bring it up again.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Bob.
Yeah, just remind me as well at the end, that what Jen's raising is very central to the work we're doing in the UK as well. Particularly in the respect of, I guess that, the culture of government in general and its relationship with communities and people.
Thanks, Bob. And we've worked with a dozen local government in the UK, as well as, of course, dozens here. And I agree. And I think that it's something that, I'll let the next two, I'll let the sessions, but thank you. Thank you for your comment. Okay, I'm going to hand over because I reckon Michelle's probably wrapping me over the knuckles virtually. Yep, she is. All right, I'll hand over to Michelle. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks, Dee, and I'll get you to share the presentation. And if Dee gave you the fire hose edition, I'm going to be following along because we are starting to run short of time. So I was wanting to talk about where that intersection of ABCD being an emerging practice for local government, and what we know from experience and the work that we've done is that asset-based community development is a game changer when local government adopt it as a holistic approach right across local government. It changes the relationship between a local government and the communities that they serve. It also, because we're looking at exploring community possibilities, we're not going out there and doing a needs assessment. That's not where we're starting from. We're actually starting with what's strong in our local communities rather than what's wrong. And what that means is that we don't create a wish list and give it to local government and say, right, our job community is done. We're actually sharing that leadership. We're sharing power. So asset-based community development in essence is place-based and locally focused. It is very much driven by community leadership, and as Dee said earlier, it's relationship driven. And through ABCD, we move from that level of community consultation or community engagement through to partnership, where we share power from a government perspective with the community. So it's not about that power differential that we quite often see. So Dee, I'll get you to click over to the next slide. And what we have here is the ABCD power ladder. So it talks about that shifting power. So moving residents from recipients of services offered by governments or services to actually having a real equal chair at the table or wherever we're doing this, where residents have some control over the goal setting, the planning and the implementation of local priorities and being able to capture local opportunities. So we sometimes think that, as from a government perspective, if we work for a local authority, that we're sharing power when we ask community members to fill in a survey, or we go and ask them a question, or they participate in focus groups. Sometimes we think that's actually a level of community participation, but the power still sits with us as a local authority. And then we can quite often move to a position where we think our job is done. We've got communities, residents as advisors and advocates. So we've got them participating in goal setting and planning and implementation, but generally the decision making still sits with the local authority. We might ask community members to put in an expression of interest to join one of our advisory groups or one of the governing bodies. But again, generally at a local authority level, we're deciding who those people are and giving them the tick. We're not really, opening the door to give everybody, fair representation at that table. We're generally not getting, young people, people with disabilities, older people, First Nations communities. We're not getting that diversity which exists across our communities at the table. So what we're wanting to do is really think about how do we move up this ladder so communities feel empowered to step into, being active drivers of their local desires, their local dreams, the local opportunities that they can see, and how as a local authority we become the supporter of community. So, we're walking alongside them, we're creating space where we hold space for them, for community members to come together. We throw templates out the window because community development cannot be done with templates. Every community is different, and what works in my small rural community in Australia is not going to work for, you know, Denise's community in Malta, or Dominique's communities in Germany, or Bob's communities in the UK. You know, we're all very different. So when we actually start to put community at the centre of the decision making of what happens in their communities, we have a major power shift. And it's, you know, it's really important when we include communities as active partners in the co-design of our community development plans at all levels of government, and particularly at that sort of local authority level. You know, we can collectively achieve the SDGs, and that's what we're wanting to look at. You know, SDGs aren't just something for you know, developing countries. The Sustainable Development Goals help us consider where we all are in working in the space of community development. And it certainly builds on what Professor Hannah was saying in her presentation in this morning's plenary. It's around starting with what we've got in communities, and then, you know, seeing not just our people, but all of those 6 assets that Dee spoke about as asset gifts that we can tap into. And if we can connect them up, quite often we find communities have everything they need to get what they want. And that's the role that we play as you know, from a local authority perspective. Dee, can I just get you to click over, or are we on to Fiona? Fantastic, thank you. So if we think about how do we do that, and how is it different? So quite often from a local authority perspective, we come with an answer to community. You know, we've already decided the strategy, we've decided the plan, and we then go to community and we recruit people to implement the answers or the plan that we've developed. And what we then have is an additional problem of lack of motivation, because communities don't see themselves in that plan. It doesn't actually build on those, you know, local priorities or the opportunities that local people exist within their community. So what we're looking at with an asset-based community development approach is starting with the learning conversation, you know, discovering what people in the community care about, how they see a situation, or how they see the opportunities in the community, and what they have to offer. So how can they be participants in this co-creation of the communities that we want? And then we can start to mobilise those assets that we've identified when we do some asset mapping, so we know what's out there. We can, you know, start to connect everybody around what they care about, and we start to mobilise those assets. So it's just around, you know, from a local government perspective, changing the conversations that we have, rather than writing policies and plans in isolation of community. It's actually putting community at the centre of those plans and policies, etc., that we develop, and having them lead the way. And it doesn't mean that there's not a role for local authorities or community development staff within local authorities. There's a greater role of actually supporting communities and connecting community together, rather than taking on that role of the service provider or doing to communities. Okay, thank you, Dee. Are there any questions, any thoughts on that? We could maybe, great, thanks, Dee. So we can stop sharing. Just any reflections before I hand over to Fiona, who's going to take us through some questions.
Maybe just a very quick one from Dominic, which is about the role of local government, and that's an emerging capacity. I've been working in a number of contexts where local government still sees themselves as
Oh, look, and I'm absolutely hear what you're saying, Dominic, and we experience that here. That once we have these conversations with local authorities and give them a different way of doing something, because sometimes they, I always like to say to councils or local authorities, how are you making a difference to community? All of the money, the resources that you're putting into community, would it be much better to work through a co-design process using asset-based community development so that you can actually achieve things, becomes more sustainable, it's better economics, and sometimes we do need to frame it that way. It's just a smart way of working. Does that answer your question? Fantastic. And Dr. Russell, I can see you with your hand up.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to add some reflection on ABCD, just from the Tanzanian perspective. In Tanzania, we have a similar version of ABCD, which is being titled as O and OD, meaning opportunities and obstacles to development. And that one has been adopted by the local government since 2002. That is like over 2 decades ago. Now the challenges that they've been facing is well, that is in the policy documents on the regulations, but the local government officials do not have an understanding of what they're supposed to be doing. So, and that's the case with the local government and the central government. So it was like some scholars developed the model, and the government thought that the model was useful, but it sounds like the political will was not there. I mean, the people, not just the political will, but the local government officials never understood it. And now they kind of like engage into a revised version of ONOD in 2019. And again, there are some complaints from the local government officials that we do not understand this. Now, I did some research there. I've been engaging with those people, and they say that there is too much interference from the central government to the local affairs at the local government level. So the local government units serve as the wings of the central government. So I don't know what is your comment on the local government, central government relationships. Thank you.
There's certainly always a lot of pressure when you've got just your central governments trying to implement. In a lot of cases, they do set legislation that local authorities have to follow. But I think that what we're looking at with ABCD is actually activating the community, and at the end of the day, central governments want to be re-elected. If it's following the will and working with community and showing a different way of working with community, how that can achieve greater results, then that's a win-win, not only for community, but also for central governments and for local governments to have that voice of being able to say to central governments, back off, we're here for our community. So yeah, that would be my response to that. I hope that helps. Fantastic. I am now going to hand over to Fiona, who's going to take you through some ABCD questions, and we're going to pop you in breakout rooms.
Thank you, Michelle. So we are going to, there's 4 questions of A, B, C, D that are quite great. We use them in our workshops, and we also get people to use them in their places of work as well. And, you know, just to think about these and have conversations to see what communities can do for themselves, what do they need a little bit of help with, but also what governments might need to stop doing. So we're going to put you, as Michelle said, pop you into breakout rooms to have a chat about this and see if you can come up with a couple of ideas maybe for each of these, or certainly something that you're passionate about what needs to either stop happening or that you know communities do for themselves really, really, really well. Because we know those things are out there as well. And if you can champion those things, it might give somebody else an idea also. So we'll put you into breakout rooms. The questions are on the screen right now, but I think we're going to put them in the chat as well. Thank you, Dee, with thumbs up, and enjoy your conversations.
Okay.
And here you all come back in like little popcorns in the popcorn machine. It's fabulous. We love it. So after your conversations, I'm just going to ask one person from each group to give us one piece of gold that you came out with that. So 2 very quick pieces of feedback would be lovely. One of you from each group.
Shall I go?
Thanks.
I tried
Thanks,
to take
Jen.
notes. We'll see. We found lots of things under question 4 that government must stop doing. Eventually we got onto the other questions, but 4 was pretty dominant. And it should, well, it includes stop determining what money you get and what will be measured as a good result for that. The example given was recruiting a certain number of volunteers as opposed to them being people already committed to volunteering who want to carry on. And
Fantastic, Jen.
so yes, and then we had lots of other examples of question 4, like stop treating people as service users and treat them as partners, and it carried on in that vein.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. It is a great question, number 4. Someone from the other group. I know there was another group.
Okay, just I'm going to share a few things from our group. Okay, just a few things. We thought that the context is different from each community. So just depending on the community, on the context, then there are some things which the government can do and some things which the community can do. But always, like maybe the general consensus is always the government and the communities must work together. That the communities have to be involved in each and everything that the government does. So that was like a general consensus at the end of the day, working together in partnership.
Fantastic.
Yes.
I love it. And thank you for that. We love using these questions, and I encourage you to use them with other people. Go to a meeting where there's lots of different people and ask these questions and see how it works. So thank you very much. And I'm handing you over to Dee, who's going to wrap us up in a blankie and send us home.
Thanks, Fiona. Jen, did you get to what you needed? With the governments can be involved, it's all right, but it's the how.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
I think they shouldn't be excluded either. I think there should be an active choice to engage in the way that we might want to.
Good. I thought you'd get what you needed out of what was coming. Good. Okay, so this is just an in summary before we wrap this up. And it's kind of no-brainers, it's simple stuff, but it's powerful. So dare to think small. You know, we don't have to have these massive big projects. We can take little steps. Celebrate those small steps, making sure that we get told no so often in this work, and we come up against brick walls. So if you have a little thing that happens that is a yes, or it's an exciting pump the air, then celebrate that with your team, with your family, with something. Lead by stepping back. So remember that dance. That dance is constant. We can lead when we need to. We step back when we're not. It's this constant movement. And the last one is from Mike Green, who is from ABCD for Inclusion. So that's a book, actually, Dominique and who was it? Donna, that you would really like to look up is Mike Green's book. He's done ABCD for Inclusion for decades, and he says starting anywhere leads everywhere. So don't overthink it. Don't wait for the next board meeting. Don't wait until you get things right or perfect. Just start anywhere. You start that little snowball and the momentum will build. Absolutely. So that's just a quick summary. So we'd like you to just put something in the chat there. How might you transform local planning with community at the centre? Just one idea you might think of for us to check out and finish up this session. A couple of you can speak it if you like. I'm going to take this share down so I can see you all as well. But how might you transform local planning with community at the centre? Remember, it could be a small step. Is there a small step that you might take that could transform local planning with community at the centre? Feel free to speak it or put it in the chat.
I think I would ask them, I'd like to ask them what they believe their strengths are and how they could best utilise that strength to move forward.
Thank you. Anyone else?
What also happened here, we have started asset mapping exercises with communities, and we bring communities together and we let them map their assets. And by doing that, it involves government, and the conversation starts on a totally different level. It's really becoming a bottom-up approach, you know, and government start listening to community members. But not everywhere. I know about 2 communities where this was done.
Nice. Thank you, Hannah. Michelle, do you want to put the guidebook in the chat? Yep. So we've developed over the years a guidebook, and yep, I see you, Bob. But it's about 100 pages long. It's a free download. Michelle's going to put the chat in the link in the chat. Please download it, use it, whatever you can do with it. Let us know. Bob.
I was just going to say, for those, and I know there's a number on this call that are in the same arena as I am. If you're working with in the sort of health and social services sphere, we found it really, really useful to apply asset-based community development principles to our work with individuals and families. It's just, and then to pull people together in that process. And if you want to know more about that, come to my session tomorrow morning.
Yay! Nice one. Thanks, Bob. Oh, I might be asleep. I mightn't be there, but it's not from not lack of wanting to. Yeah, so any final comments before we wrap it up?
I just wanted to say, girls, I wanted to really thank you and to say that when I come into the room, I didn't understand, but I'm delighted to realise that he uses tools. I just didn't know what it was called. So thank you so much for giving me the theory with practice. I really appreciate it.
Beautiful. Thanks, Donna. Lovely. I think we all did that when we found it, right, Hannah? You hear ABCD and you go, hey, that's how I already work. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Feel free to take yourselves off mute. We can all say goodbye together, and you know, it's the small steps as well. So thanks for being part of it with us. And we'll see you around somewhere.
Could we have a screenshot?
Thank you.
Yes, let's do a screenshot. let's do a screenshot before everybody goes.
Okay, I'm counting down. 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a good
Bye.
night.